And our next speaker, I'm delighted to say, is Suki Sandhu, OBE, founder and CEO of Involve, the inclusion people. In 2011, Suki established Orderless, which is a global executive search firm that is leveling the playing field for women, ethnic minorities, hurrah, LGBT plus people at the most senior levels in business. You know, amen to that. With 65% of their appointments since 2011 being diverse candidates. He's also the founder and CEO of Involve, a network which champions diversity and inclusion in business that helps organizations to actually drive cultural change and create more inclusive workplaces. And goodness knows, we definitely need more knowledge on how to do that. Suki's also a Stonewall ambassador, as if he hasn't got enough to do, and launched the Suki Sandhu LGBTQI Asia Fund to support activism in Asia, and is also the patron of the Albert Kennedy Trust, and has been appointed to the board of directors of Outright Action International based in New York. Also a trustee for the Guild of HR Professionals, and was awarded an OBE in the 2019 New Year's Honours for services to diversity in business. Wow, what an absolute accolade, and well acknowledged. Suki, thank you very much for joining us. We are looking forward to hearing what you've got to share with us today. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Jacqueline, I thought the bios were condensed.
Well, yours is so long.
I'll be speaking to the team about that, don't worry. No, great to be here. Thank you for having me. Yeah, really excited to speak to you today. I did have a presentation, but actually Jacqueline actually covered a lot of the statistics that I was going to share, so thank you for that, Jacqueline. Now I don't need to do a presentation, so I'm just going to talk to you about the kind of work that we do, and particularly what we've been seeing in the last 10, 11 weeks, particularly around Black Lives Matter, in the kind of work that we do and the kind of action companies are taking, which I think is what you'd find most useful. So yeah, I thought I'd just start by talking about why I set up my business to begin with, the first one, Orderless. So I've been in executive search for over 17 years. And for those of you that might not know what executive search is, that's effectively very senior hiring for organizations. So usually it's when you're proactively headhunting talent for very senior seats, and we recruit across public and private sector. And we also do board appointments as well as executive roles. And the reason I established it is because, having been in the industry for about 8 years, I kind of got bored of meeting the same client, if I'm honest. It was always a chairman or CEO who always was an older straight white guy. And apologies to any older straight white guys that might be watching, but I was like, something needs to change here. We need some difference in this world. And I also got frustrated with the fact that every client wanted to hire women, which I'm hugely supportive of. We've appointed lots of women in the last 9 years across our mandates and across clients. But I was always the one that would say, well, what about race? Like, you have an entirely white leadership team, you have an entirely white board, and you keep talking to us about wanting to hire a female CFO, a female board member. I'm like, that is fantastic. Well done, you. You're going to get a brownie point when you go to heaven. But actually, what about race? And if you roll forward now to where we've been in the last 10 weeks, I have never seen the change in mindset in clients. And I'm talking about chairmen and CEOs here, because they're critical in in driving the agenda in business, because they lead the organizations, where I've never seen so much enthusiasm and proactivity around wanting to learn more about ethnic minority inclusion, but also take representation seriously. Because as Ollie mentioned, role models are critical. So from our perspective, visibility is key. People want to be who they can see. And that matters in your business. If you're a global business, or even if you just represent UK society, why are you not thinking about being reflective of those communities so that you can be more representative? Because actually, when people look up, they want to see themselves represented there, knowing that they can actually get there too. And so in Orderless, we're very much focused on going out to find diverse talent. So an example would be, we're recruiting a CFO for a tech business right now. And for the first time, a CEO very explicitly said that he wants to hire a Black person for that seat. Now, in my 17 years of doing this, I have never had a CEO ever say that. So from my perspective, it's music to my ears that he is now more proactive and serious about wanting to do something different. Now, what we've got to be concerned about is we don't want it to be tokenistic. Because also, we're not going to go out to the market and say, this CEO wants to hire a Black person. It's not going to happen. We need to go out to the market and find everyone so that it's a level playing field for all candidates, including the wider ethnic minority candidates too, not just the Black community, so that everyone has a fair chance to get the job. And I think one of the reasons why we haven't seen the representation of race climb over the last 10 years or so is, first of all, because gender has dominated the conversation. Gender is the easier, more tangible thing to talk about, because a lot of the chairmen and CEOs in charge have got daughters. So they have got their daughters entering the business world who are sharing their horrible experiences of being a woman in business and getting them to do something. So they're building empathy with gender. But when you think about race, a lot of them might not necessarily have ethnic minorities in their personal circles. And when we already know that the representation of race at the C-suite and at the board level is woeful, they're also not getting that empathy directly in their daily work life either. So how are they building empathy with ethnicity? What happened with BLM is the fact that you saw someone be murdered, and it was recorded, and it was tragic, and it was disgusting. And that is what made people stop up. That's why everyone's protesting on the street, because they're angry. They've had enough. I know as a brown person that I'm slightly safer in the street because I'm not Black. And that is unacceptable. I think the key thing also about race is it's deeply uncomfortable in companies for them to talk about. So rather than saying the wrong thing, they would say nothing at all. And actually the time for inaction is over. And I've been doing this now as you can probably tell, I'm slightly opinionated. I'm not there to be the friend of my clients. I'm there to speak truth to power. I'm there to hold a mirror up to their organization and help them do the right thing. And actually, so when you look at the way that we manage a recruitment process, we do two things. We widen the talent pool so they see more diversity. So these candidates that ordinarily have never had access to those opportunities are now getting access, because that's who we connect with. And then the second thing we do is ensuring that we're running an inclusive recruitment process for that client. Because actually there's no point spending a lot of money with us to find diverse talent if we then can't level the playing field and mitigate bias during the process itself. So what does that mean? So for us, it is a process. So first of all, who are the stakeholders that you're identifying? This can actually work at any level of the organization, by the way, when it comes to inclusive recruitment. So not just the senior level. So do you know who all the stakeholders are involved in the process? Are they all clear on what the brief is? Have you all decided what the assessment criteria is? Do you know how you're assessing the assessment criteria? Are you all clear on that? If it's interview questions, is it competency-based? Is it strength-based? Are we ensuring that assessment is consistent for all the candidates? Because what we're trying to do here is mitigate the bias. So when it comes to clients saying, my favorite bit of feedback, she's just not a cultural fit, I'm like, that's interesting. Can you tell us how you're assessing cultural fit based on the assessment criteria that we chose? Because affinity bias, for instance, is one of the worst kind of bias in a recruitment process, because it's when someone maybe went to the same school, they may be trained together at a Big Four accounting firm. So we've got to try and mitigate that and make sure it's always aligned to the criteria. So that's how we've managed to have such a high proportion of diverse appointments. And the reason I set up Involve 2 years after Ordelis is because I was very conscious of the fact that we were doing all these great appointments in business, but then what if they don't stay? What if they don't want to stay in the business? Like, you can't do representation without the culture and the values. So from my perspective, Involve is about helping businesses be more inclusive. So we do things like, we have a global cross-company mentoring scheme. We have an emerging leaders program. We do events around diversity subjects, like we did a leadership roundtable last week around ethnicity pay gap reporting. And one of the biggest things we do is we do these role model lists published by Yahoo Finance globally annually, celebrating the top 100 women, the top 100 future leaders, the top 50 allies for gender, ethnicity, and LGBT. And we reach millions of people when these lists get published. Amberly, for instance, is on the EC as well talking list. She's been in the list this year for our ethnic minority one, so well done to her. And you don't just get on the list because you're the CEO of HSBC. You have to demonstrate what you're doing for those communities. It's about actively supporting those communities both inside and outside the workplace. And we also really believe that intersectionality is really important. And what I mean by intersectionality is that we need to get the communities to do more together. So when we talk about race, ethnicity, gender, and LGBT+, it shouldn't be in isolation, and we should be trying to get the communities to do more together. We also need to get the allies to help. So getting straight leaders to help LGBT, getting men to help women, and white leaders to help ethnic minorities, because you always need the majority to help. And I suppose when it comes to intersectionality, me, myself, I tick many boxes myself. Like Jacqueline talked about some of her background at the beginning. So I'm Indian, I'm British, I'm Sikh, I'm gay, I'm working class. One of the weirdest things about me is I was born and raised in Derby, in the Midlands. And no one ever expects that because they think I'm really posh, and I'm really not. And it's only whenever I say my vowels that they know that I'm not posh, because I say bath and up and path. And that's when someone knows that I'm not from London, even the way I say London. But it's so ingrained, it's so important to me, because I want to make sure that everyone, well, basically the world is not fair. Everyone does not get the same opportunities. And I mean, I spoke to a CEO yesterday for a FTSE business where he's got an entirely white leadership team, and he's about to make a key hire that he's going to retain us for. And he really wants to make sure he gets a really diverse list of candidates. And ideally, his dream is an ethnic minority woman, because then he gets to increase his gender statistics as well as the ethnicity side with one person. So, but he was talking about how he's helping this black woman in his business who's from Nigeria. She's been there for 5 years, and she's still in a data entry role. And when they looked at that, they realized that when she was in Nigeria, she was like head of client services in financial, so this is the financial services business. And so she hasn't progressed in that business. So one thing, and it's not like she's not working hard, she's loyal because she's been there 5 years. If she wasn't a good employee, she wouldn't be there. So what's happening? Why is she not climbing the ladder? So this is the one thing that really frustrates me, is when people talk about a meritocracy and the best person for the job. But when it's seeped in bias, that doesn't happen. And actually, his leadership team is the case in point, in the fact that he has an entirely white male leadership team and only one woman in the team at the moment. So for us, it's about helping businesses. But just seeing the active approach from CEOs stepping up is really good. We published an open letter. Sorry, how much time do I have?
It would be great if you could wrap up elegantly.
Yeah, great. Okay, so what I'll finish with then is we published an open letter in the Sunday Times a few weekends ago, where we had 28 CEOs in the UK commit to taking specific actions on driving race inclusion in business. It was probably the most challenging 72 hours of my entire life, if you think about trying to get FTSE CEOs to agree to sign and take action. But we've got people like the CEO of ITV, WPP, Schroders, Barclays, etc. It's a really good list. But the key thing is we wanted the CEO to sign, because the CEO is the person that takes action. They're ultimately responsible for the business. They're the culture carrier in the organization. That's who everyone looks up to for values and behaviors. And one of the biggest actions that were really key is being transparent and reporting annually on what they're doing about race inclusion. So we were really concerned that as the protests start to subside, we didn't want that interest and enthusiasm in race inclusion to also subside. So what this letter has done is holding them accountable to actually taking action. And one of the biggest actions is also around setting targets for ethnicity at all levels in the business. So I'm going to shut up now, but I hope that was valuable in terms of the kind of things that we've been doing. And I'll pass back to Jacqueline.